Build-ups are extremely important in dance music, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to take a boring, uninspired, basic build-up, apply a bunch of simple techniques that are going to make it sound super professional, builds a lot of tension, and will absolutely smash the dance floor, which will make more DJs want to play it and feature it and play out your music. Let's check out the examples of before and after what we're going to create today.
Slide, but it's dead. 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 Slide, but it's dead inside.
After my success of my other video about making deep progressive breakdowns, I got a lot of comments saying you wanted this build-up video. Let's keep that momentum going. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to cover bass lines for deep progressive music in my next video or lead sound. Let's jump into the video. You know the drill. The project file is available for download. Make sure to grab that in the link in the description below. Subscribe, like the video, and let's get started. So here's the project, and I'm going to go through and add about maybe 10 or 15 different techniques that are pretty quick and easy to use, but are going to make this breakdown sound really exciting. I'll start with some of the easier ones first, which will deliver more and more intensity with the build-up. So one of the important things that I see a lot of people forget to do is that they are building their track up, but they're not pulling out energy from maybe the low end or the high end of the track before dropping into the track. So first, what I'm going to do is in my drums, I'm going to add an EQ, and I'm going to filter some of the low end and the high end out. So with my hats, I don't have too much low end, but I'm just going to automate the frequency. As it's building, I'm going to bring that frequency up, and as it is building, I'm also going to bring the frequency down. So I'm going to start a little bit lower here so that when the drums come in, it's not just immediately coming in, they are being filtered in like this. This gives it a little bit of tension, and it just doesn't feel like you're just dropping in the drums all of a sudden. Right before the drop comes in, I'm going to filter back down and remove a lot of those drums. This gives it a bit of a sense of release because you are hearing the drums coming in, you're anticipating them to come up, and then when they start to come back down, it leaves room for the other instruments and gives this kind of freeing feeling where it's like it's very loose and kind of like hands in the air type vibe. I'm going to reference that a few times in this build-up because right before the drop is when you want the most tension, and then that release where you kind of feel like you're just floating, waiting, anticipating for that drop to come in. And that makes that drop feel so much more powerful when you kind of are with the groove and you can kind of count along to it. You kind of feel like you're in the grid, and then the last few seconds or few beats before the drop, you just feel that airiness and that lightness, and when it finally hits, it just feels so much sweeter. So I'm going to do that here, bring down the filter so that when the drums come up, they build, they build, they build, and they filter back down. I'm going to do the same thing with some of the synths. So my ARPs here, I'm going to do the same thing, filter that down. So right before the drop, I'm going to bring down that cutoff filter. Just gives that little bit of space before the drop. I'm going to come back and do this to a couple different elements after I bring them in later. Vocal I will leave in. Pads I will leave because I like that little bit of atmosphere. Let's take a listen to that. Already that feels more interesting to me because you're bringing up that energy, you're dropping it back, and you're giving room for that suspense. Another thing that I like to do is I like to introduce a few elements in the buildup that are happening in the drop. This makes it so that the drop doesn't feel so out of place when it comes back in. It feels like it gradually blends into the drop rather than having just a section that's a buildup and a section that's a drop. They kind of flow into each other a little bit more. So I like to add in things like the drums before the drop as well. That's why I have these percussion here still playing. So it's just a few elements intertwining between the buildup and the drop. I want to do this with the bass as well. So I'm going to bring back the bass elements. And it's very important that I do the same thing. I filter out the low end. So I'll grab my EQ here and filter out the lows. I don't need those low frequencies in the buildup. So I'm going to filter them out. Just maybe filter out some of the sub. While I bring in this new element, it's going to increase the tension as well because we're bringing in new ideas. So we can take a listen to that. But it's important that I filter out that power because in a build-up, you don't need a lot of low end usually. You want to be taking out that low end and really making it feel tense. So I'm going to increase that high pass filter up until maybe 400 or 500, and I'm going to do the same thing on the low pass so that it also filters out the top. And this isn't vital, but this is just something I like to do so that it's kind of crossing back over, and as it's taking out the lows, it's also taking out the highs. You can leave this open for different types of bass. Maybe you like the way the bass sounds in the build-up, but for this one, I want to pull it out so I have that section of open kind of airiness before the drop. Perfect. That transition is a little bit better. I'm going to pull this down a tiny bit more. Awesome. Very simple, but very effective. I let the atmospheres play through because they're very thin sounding. So this vocal here, it's a nice way to transition into the drop. It doesn't need to be taken out because it's very airy. And if you want to learn how I did the rest of the sounds in this video, make sure to check out my How to Make Deep Progressive Breakdowns video. I'll put a link right here in the corner. For the effects, I only have right now this crash and this white noise. So just a crash with an echo and white noise. Very essential for creating tension and build-ups and such, and transitions. Next, I want to move on to my lead sound. And for this lead sound, I want to focus on the cutoff as well as the sustain. And this is going to build quite nicely by increasing the cutoff frequency so that it opens up more, but also by increasing the sustain amount so that it holds the notes longer. So this is actually one of my favorite things to do. So I'll go into the synth itself. I have my frequency. I'm going to build up that cutoff as the track is building. So the track is playing. Maybe I filter down from the breakdown into the build. Then I just draw in some automation here. I want to open it up a little bit sooner, so I'm going to bring this up, make it nice and bright. And it sounds more exciting and more interesting, but it doesn't really hit that hard. So I'm going to go into the envelope sustain. So if I go into envelope 2, sustain, show automation, I'm going to increase this as it's building up, and the notes are going to play and hit a little bit longer, but I have to make sure that the notes themselves are long because the sustain matters how long the note is. So if I do it this way, it's not going to work as well as if I increase the length of the notes. So let's take a listen. So this stuff you probably already know. Like I said, we're starting easy and moving into the more advanced stuff. So let's go into the next thing, which is synth chopping or melody chopping. And we're going to reduce the length of the melody and repeat it faster and faster, which is going to increase the tension quite obviously. So as the melody is playing, we can grab that melody and duplicate that. So maybe right here where it starts over, or we're going into the build up here. Maybe right here we'll do it. We can even do it one more time, but I think it might be a little bit too intense, but let's try it. I think that actually sounds okay. So we're going to use that. It's a really good way to build tension, cutting and chopping up, making it faster, kind of having it in time every time. I like the way that sounds. So let's move on to the next thing. Sometimes I see artists, they kind of just drop some of the drums out of the build-up to add tension, removing elements. That's a good way to add tension, but I like using filters and such because it makes it feel a little bit more organic and a little bit more professional. So I've taken out the hi-hat here. I'm going to bring that back in because I want to hear that build up with the whole track, and I had it out at the beginning. Now I have the drums. I'm going to do my favorite thing, which is adding a reverb to the drums to build. I do this in a ton of my tracks. So I've thrown a reverb onto the drum group here, and I'm going to bring that dry wet all the way down. The decay time I can bring up maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and I want to have the high cut off, and I'll show you why, because if the drums are without the high cut, they get really muddy, but with the high cut off and the low cut on, it's much more like thin and airy, and it just adds a little bit more tension than the muddier type of drums would. So combining this filter with the reverb is a really nice way to build up slowly and really grab that tension. So I'm going to turn the dry wet down, show automation, and right as the drums come in, I'm going to have that dry wet on because I don't want the drums coming in very dry. I want to add that nice tail right off the bat, add that airiness, build that up. I love doing it this way because the drums feel very organic when they are rising like this. You're taking instruments that are already in your track, adding reverb to them and building them rather than introducing new elements to add that tension, so it sounds very professional. Again, leaving space for that pre-drop sound. Let's take a listen. Next, I'm going to spice up the snare roll. I'm going to actually take off a little bit of the end and take off a bit of the end of the drums. We don't need so much of that coming through. Make that space before the drop even bigger. And for the snare roll, it's very typical, just increasing in tempo, having the notes, and then building up. But I want to use some EQ to really, again, grow with the track, build that tension. So first, I'm going to put on an EQ. And I have this bandpass filter, which just means I'm filtering the lows and the highs, and I'm going to control that. So I'm going to control top end here. It's going to start a little bit more closed, and then it's going to open right up. And then the opposite for the lows, I'm going to bring the lows maybe a little bit higher at the beginning so you can't hear them as much, and then bring them down. And then maybe at the end, I'm going to bring them right back up. And that's going to kind of allow some of the low end to come through and then take it back out, again, increasing that feeling of like thinning out the top. I'll add a bit of reverb onto that as well. And let's listen to it now. Again, I want to turn the high cut off and the low cut on. This is another really cool trick that adds a lot of power to the buildup, and it's a vocoder on the snares or the drums. So I can automate the dry wet to increase as the buildup is building, and I can increase the release time as well. And as the track is building up, those hits are going to feel longer and more aggressive. Okay, that sounds good. Let's go to the white noise and add this really quick, simple trick that you can do with an auto pan. And it sounds pretty cool. Grab the auto pan, maybe put that on after the reverb. And I'm going to increase the amount and rate with some automation. So rate, bring that down. And as it's building up the track, I'm going to increase that speed of which the auto pan is going to be going back and forth. I put that amount up to basically 100%, and the frequency I'll bring up a little bit higher. And let's take a listen to this. So it pans back and forth in your ears and it sounds really interesting, but I'm going to bring that back so it's speedier for a little bit longer, and I'll bring the amount up so it stays like that for longer. I'm going to bring the frequency up and hold it there for a moment and bring back the frequency and amount back down to 0 to give that same sense of kind of coming back to the center of the track. And I can add some filtering with my EQ as well. So as the track is building up, I can open up this EQ and then bring it back down. And I like to push up a little bit of resonance to give this kind of like whooshing effect. Maybe a little bit less. That sounds pretty good. So now I'm going to show you another one of my favorite tools to use, and that is called a washout. I've made this rack myself. I'm going to throw that onto the channel, and you can download this rack as well with the project files. The link is in the description below. And basically it is a filtering, reverb, saturator, phaser, a bunch of different effects that are going to blend this sound together, wash it out, and make it sound like a very big rushing feeling of atmosphere and sound, and blend it into the background of the mix, which pulls it away, creates tension, which is what we want in the buildup. So I'm going to automate this. You could, of course, add your own reverb to this and just automate it up as it's playing, but this way we're adding all these extra effects and really pushing it far back in the mix. So I'll show automation here, and as this track is building up, I want to bring up that automation. And the last couple notes here, I'm actually going to delete and use the washout as this really cool trick. So first I'll show you the washout. Maybe I'll push these a little bit further back. Sounds really powerful, very atmospheric, and builds up a lot of pressure in that buildup. But I'm going to bring this down, and as the track comes back up, I'm going to bring that up again. And this sounds really cool. This is like kind of like fading in a reverb tail or fading in sound before the drop. Check this out. So you get that really cool like sound before the drop, and I just love that. I think it's a really good way to add power to that drop. Let's listen in the context of the mix. Just makes that drop hit so much harder when it has that little bit of fade in right before it. That was one of my favorite techniques. Let's go into one that's very common to do, but always is a crowd pleaser, and that is just pitch risers. So I have 2 pitch risers here. I made one in Vital, which is a free synth. If you don't have Vital, I recommend grabbing it. It's totally free and it's a great tool. And basically all I did was added a macro onto the pitch. So when I play a note and then I can automate that macro, I've automated this macro to rise in pitch. Added some panning to it. But what I like to do is actually hold the pitch at the end for a little bit. This gives it even more tension. It's just so satisfying to hit that pitch, getting up to that octave, and then having that before the drop and before the pre-drop there. That's actually what I'm going to write down in this locator. I'll write pre-drop just so we remember where it is and pay attention to it. So then that satisfaction of that pitch rising, I absolutely love when I hear it in songs, and I do that in a lot of mine as well. Then I have another pitch riser that I made, and it's just a really cool idea is to add more than one of these risers. Sometimes they sound cheesy, so I don't want you to go in and grab these like early 2000s Vengeance packs with the super huge risers that sound really cheesy. Sometimes they can take away from the track. But if you add a lot of atmosphere, reverb, delays, and choose ones that are tasteful, then you can place a few in your track, make them like really, really long like this. Another pitch riser, some movement. Combining the two. This just sounds really cool. I'm going to pull off the top there because I don't need that. I'm going to fade out here and let that pitch riser at the top hold that note where it doesn't do that here. And then I'm actually going to stretch this out maybe a little bit more so that this buildup is longer and it sounds a little bit more interesting, as well as the pitch is now going to be a little bit different, and it's going to give this like eerie feeling. Because the pitch is rising slower now on this one than it is on this one. And again, what are we doing? Creating more tension. And that is what these buildups are for. So I actually messed up and I put the pre-drop a little bit early here. So let's move that over, move this over, and move this over, and fix that pitch. Nobody saw anything. And there we go. That's actually where it's supposed to be. So let's take a listen again. Perfect. Word of caution is that sometimes these are a little bit too loud and they become very, very obvious that you're using like a pitch riser, and sometimes they sound a little bit cheesy. So just keeping them quieter in the background, almost like subconsciously, it's just building that tension. I wonder how many times I'm going to say the word tension in this video, but it is building up, and even if you have it really quiet, your ear still picks up on it and you can still feel that increase in buildup. I'm not going to say it. Tension. For this next part, I'm using an ARP washout, but I'm also using it on a vocal. And this is really great because vocals are super dynamic, and this is going to add a lot of value to this buildup. So I grabbed this vocal sample off of Splice. But I don't like using vocal samples off Splice. I've done this in my last 2 videos where I've taken the vocal sample and I've used an AI tool to actually convert it so that it is the same vocal sample that's been re-sung by somebody else. So it's actually a vocal cover, and that way nobody else has that exact same vocal. So I'm going to grab this vocal and bring it into Audemy. Audemy is an online tool that converts your vocal recordings into a cover of another vocalist using AI. It's really cool. Audemy's claim is that they convert your vocals with royalty-free voices, and they can create copyright-free vocal covers. and much more. So basically, they're claiming that you can take any vocal sample or recording, use an AI tool to convert that into a vocal cover of one of their many different vocalists that they have with the AI tool, and then you are royalty-free, good to go, because it is technically no longer an original track, an original recording. It is now a vocal cover. Let's go ahead and click convert. So to convert the splice sample into this vocal recording, I just have to drop it into this area here, and it sounds like this.
The city's alive, but it's dead inside.
There's lots of reverb on there, which I don't really want in the vocal recording, especially if we're going to be making a cover. So I can scroll down here and it says remove instrumental. If there's instruments already in the track, you can remove those, which is a really powerful feature. You can remove background vocals, but I don't think there's any here. I do want to remove the reverb and echo, and I don't need to remove the noise because there's probably not any background noise aside from the reverb and echo. I'm going to go back up and I want to choose my singer that I'm going to use for the AI conversion. So this one is Jack.
And you've been out all night, I don't know where you've been, you're slurring all your words.
So it's going to convert this into the vocal as if Jack was singing it, but this isn't really the style that I want. So I'm going to go into the different vocalists here and look at the tags. So here we have rock and singer. We probably don't need that. Let's choose maybe more of a pop or dance vocal.
It never fades away. You're staying.
That one's really nice, but I prefer Amelia for this vocal sample. A little bit more EDM style. So I'll click on Amelia and I'm going to scroll back down to the settings. I know that my original is in A minor and my track is in C minor. So I'm going to pitch shift this up from an A to an A sharp to a B and then to the C. So it's going to actually export in that higher key register. Then a conversion strength, I'm going to choose 100%. I want just the AI vocal and not the original to come through. And then I'm going to hit convert. After a few seconds, conversion is done. Let's take a listen to how it sounds now.
The city's alive, but it's dead inside. Won't you open, be my guide?
And the original?
The city's alive, but it's dead inside. The city's alive, but it's dead inside.
Very cool how it converts that, and it sounds very rich and authentic. We're going to add in our own processing so that it fits in the mix a bit better. I've drag and dropped that into my track, and I've lined it up so that it sounds like this.
Alive, but it's dead inside. Won't you open? The city's alive, but it's dead inside.
And then I'm going to use the same washout effect as before, and doing this twice is going to have a huge impact by having so much atmosphere rushing into this buildup. So I'll go into the washout. Let's go show automation. And I want to have this the whole time because I want to add my own reverb and delay to this.
Live, but it's dead inside, but it's dead inside, but it's...
Maybe bring it down a little bit more. And then as it's building up, the same thing. I'm going to build that up a lot through the build up. Whoops, start over here. Build that up quite a bit and then bring it back down. And then as it drops, it's going to play that last vocal bit.
Live, but it's dead inside.
And as the drop hits, it's going to hit that last note. And that's going to be really cool because you're hearing this repeating over and over again. And then finally, again, that tension builds and you want that drop. You want that release and you want that satisfaction of hearing that the rest of that vocal sample and it hits on the drop, which I think sounds really cool. One more thing I'm going to do is actually filter this in a little bit more. So I'm going to grab an EQ and throw that at the end and just introduce this slowly, kind of like how I did with the drums, so that it doesn't get kind of repetitive and boring. So I'll bring this down and let's try this. There's also a lot of bass here in the vocal. I'm going to reduce that.
But it's dead inside, 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 but it's
So I think I filtered out a little bit too much of the low end and it didn't really hit as hard on the drop. I'm going to turn it up a little bit more in volume and I've pushed up that dry wet a little bit more on that washout. And let's try one more time. If you want to check out Audemy and create your own AI vocals, click the link in the description below. Just a few more things, but these are the touch-ups that we have to do to make sure that it does sound as good as possible. So I think I'm going to bring this washout back a little bit because I want that vocal to kind of come through a little bit more dry. That way when it's playing, it will kind of reach back in. And that way we can hear it in the build-up. The leads I'm going to turn up a little bit more. They are a bit quiet and they're not really punching through as well as I thought they would. And I am clipping a bit here, so I'm going to turn them down here and turn them up in the actual group, and then turn down the other part of the group. Let's take a listen to that. Okay, that's sounding good. I wanted to interrupt the video very quickly to let you know that my masterclass is now open for enrollment. I'm doing one a few weeks after posting this video, but I will do other masterclasses later on, so you can still sign up to be in those masterclasses. If you were too late to join in on this one, link is in the description below. And if you prefer to learn at your own pace, I do have music production courses as well that you can check out. Okay, back to the video. This next technique is another simple one, but it works really, really well. So you grab a utility and throw that onto your master channel. And before the drop comes in, you're actually going to reduce the width of the sound, the width of the master channel, so that it feels like it's not so wide and exciting, and then you bring it down to the center, and then when it fully drops in, it's going to be all the width back into the track, and it sounds really nice. So automate this width on the master, bring that down as it's about to drop in, and take a listen to this. Subtle is usually better for this because if we go too far, it's a little bit obvious what we're doing. You don't want to pull it down too much, only maybe like to 50% or a little bit higher, just to reduce that width a little bit. You want it to be a little bit more subconscious, and the listener doesn't really know why it sounds less exciting, but it does. And then when it drops in, you get that full power back, making it sound very exciting again. And the other thing with the utility is to automate just like 1 or 2 decibels before the drop. So let's bring down that volume by like 2.5 right before, up until the drop. So minus 2.5 and maybe a little bit more, maybe like minus 3. And as the buildup is happening, it's gonna get a little bit quieter. And then as it drops back in, you're gonna have that same big power again. It's very subtle, but pulling away just a little bit of that volume and then bringing it back in, especially on a loud system, you're going to hear it a lot more. And these two things combined just add that extra little spice on top of your buildup that is going to subconsciously sound much more interesting and much more professional to your listener, to the DJs, and to the dance floor. If I'm happy with the vocal, I want to add in 2 more layers. One is going to be just another layer of a different vocalist to bulk it up and make it sound like there's more than one person singing. And then I'm going to add in a harmony as well. This vocal, I'm going to duplicate twice. Then I'm going to go back into Audemy and drag and drop that vocal into here. And I've chosen 2 different vocalists, Freya and Amina. So I'll drag the vocal into here. This is how Amina sounds.
So I wanna let you know that my love.
And Freya.
Are you happy now? You're the only one who can up and run, make me just.
I'm not going to use 100% conversion strength because I want this to sound like it's another layer of the vocalist. So I'll just bring this to maybe 50 or 60% and I'll click convert. I'll do the same thing with Freya, except this time I want to add in a harmony. So I'm going to add in 7 semitones, which is a perfect fifth. And conversion strength, I will push up to 100% and convert. We can take a listen to Freya.
Live, but it's dead inside.
That's a perfect fifth higher. And Amina's sounds like this.
Live, but it's dead inside.
So I'll download both of those and drop that back into my project file. The original.
Live, but it's dead inside.
With the lower octave.
Live, but it's dead inside.
And with the harmony.
Live, but it's dead inside.
So I can mix these around. I can do a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, maybe turn down the volume of the lower octave vocal, and maybe the harmony can come down a little bit as well.
Live, but it's dead inside.
I'm not going to keep these vocals in here for the sake of the rest of the video, but they will be in the downloadable project files. You can do this a bunch of times with Audemy using different vocalists. You can try out different vocal samples and see if they fit in your track better. You can even make like choirs out of this, singing, 10 or 15 people singing the same thing to make a very epic sound. And I think Automate is a great tool for vocal isolation and vocal covers. So if you want to check them out, you can click the link in the description below or click this card right up here. Vocal atmospheres are also really great for buildups because you can rise with the buildup. I like to use pads like this, these really thin, airy pads, strings to carry from the buildup into the drop because it adds that consistency and it adds tension as well to the drop when you have something really bright and high like this. And I have this vocal that's just coming up to the drop because pulling things out from the drop also sounds good. So combining a bit of elements that follow through into the drop and not removing everything, because if you remove everything, it can sound a little bit like too off-putting, going from a bunch of elements to just a lot less elements. So bringing in a few into the drop makes it feel consistent, but pulling some away right at the drop also gives a sense of energy and power. So vocal pads like this are really great for transitioning into the drops, but I show you this as well in my how to make breakdowns video. All right, so let's take a listen to what we have now.
Slide, but it's dead, and 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 slide, but it's dead inside.
This buildup is sounding really great, but if you want to learn how I actually made the breakdown and chose some of the elements for this track, then click this video right here where I actually talk about how to make deep progressive breakdowns, or click this video right here which YouTube thinks you'll like based on your algorithm.